Good afternoon and welcome to the Wavy Digital Desk. I'm your host, Sarah Good. Today we're going to be talking about mental health. I know throughout this month and really throughout my time on the digital desk, we've talked a lot about mental health, whether as the full conversation or just bits and pieces, because it seems to be in every place in our lives, which is great to get it out into the public conversation. Today we're focusing on resources right here in Hampton Roads. NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness. They have a Coastal Virginia chapter. They have a lot of great accessible resources for people in this area to learn more, to advocate. So we're going to be speaking with Board President Susanna Yaroski today to talk more about what NAMI is, how it can help you, your loved ones, and how to get involved with them if you would like. So I'm just going to bring Susanna on now. Susanna, thank you so much for coming on this afternoon.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be
Absolutely.
here.
I think this is one in particular where it's great to get it out to everyone. If you have questions, please put them on the chat and Facebook and YouTube, and I'll be taking a look at that. But it's accessible and it's here for you. And I feel like it's run by people who have experienced mental illness, whether through friends or family, loved ones. How unique is it that this organization is so accessible and is so built upon, people experiencing issues with mental health?
Um, so what is great about the National Alliance on Mental Illness is that our classes, our support groups, they're all led by those with the lived experience. And so, to been there, done that, been in your shoes, it's just that component to help people who reach out for support, um, I think makes the difference.
In that lived experience, can you talk about how you got involved in NAMI and why it's so important to you to now be such a big part of it?
Yeah, definitely. So, in 2016, our daughter had had her first manic break, and we admitted her into the hospital. And when she was discharged, we didn't know what to expect. We didn't, we naively thought, she'll be put on medicine and everything will be okay. And so we learned a lot. Two different people recommended that we take the NAMI family to family class, which is a free class. And my husband and I both took it. And it was 12 weeks long at the time. It's only 8 weeks long now. And it was just a wealth of information. And it just helped us better understand and kind of navigate the path for her.
And when you took that family to family course, what was that like? What was your knowledge going into it of maybe what the public health issue of mental health was?
Oh, that's such a good question. So going into it, probably I would say minimal knowledge at all. Um, and ironically enough, my sister, who is no longer alive, had bipolar, but we didn't discuss it. It was just I know she got the diagnosis in her early 20s and then it was never discussed again. So it really wasn't a topic of conversation. So minimal knowledge my husband and I had going into it. And it was the class, the format is unique. And I want to say maybe the third class, everyone has about 5 minutes to share their story because it's not a support group, but as you grow, as you see each other each week for 2.5 hours, you start supporting each other naturally. But when all of the families share their stories, every story the next story that people tell, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's happening. And then the next family talks and you're shocked by what's going on in their family. I mean, everybody just has unique stories, but they're all heartbreaking.
And when you're in that group, when you're in that community, do you go back and wonder how many people, my neighbors, maybe my coworkers, my friends, have also experienced similar situations?
Oh, yeah, completely. When we started sharing more about what was going on with our daughter, um, actually, she was experiencing another mania, and a lot of unusual behavior was happening. So we wanted to make our immediate neighbors aware, just in case they saw anything, they could alert us or um, just to understand. And each neighbor, the three neighbors that I spoke to, each one had their own story to share with me. So, yes, once you start sharing and opening up about it, you realize everyone has got some connection to someone suffering or living with mental illness.
And it's been since 2016 when you've gotten involved. How have you seen people now that are joining where they start? Are they starting with you, like you, at maybe just a baseline knowledge of what mental health is? Do you feel like you're seeing people more involved just in general, the general public understanding what mental health is? I mean, where do you think we are right now?
I think there has been some progress with regards to seeing more information about it coming out, even with like episodes like this, there is more talk about it. But when most people, contact our office, they're usually in a crisis, and you just are scrambling for information, and you you think you're the only one, the only family that's experiencing it. So it's it's difficult for families because they're just trying to reach out and find any type of resource. And so that is what we try to provide for them, just um, someone who's sympathetic, listening, and then letting them know about what we offer, but maybe about resources, other resources in the community that they might need in that moment.
And you mentioned there, reaching out during crisis. What's the difference of reaching out in times where you're not yet at that crisis point?
So what we do with specifically our youth and young adult outreach, we have a presentation called Ending the Silence. And that is, you always want a family or anyone, you want to prevent that crisis. You want to get that, you want them to have that information, about the common warning signs of mental illness. So then if something questionable is happening, they can think to themselves, perhaps there's a mental health condition, behind this behavior, and I should seek help for them. So that early intervention and that early identification is such a huge component that we try to work on.
Do you think getting involved early in early intervention, is that at the onset of a problem? Is that understanding what mental health is before maybe you realize what an issue is? I mean, what in a perfect world does that look like?
I think in a perfect world, in utopia, I think that we're all just discussing, everyday life experiences, but then also including that mental health component, because we all have mental health. If we have a brain, we have mental health, and understanding that not everybody is mentally healthy. And that's the goal. You want everybody to be mentally healthy. So I think that education piece should be introduced to students at an earlier level. I think families, for them to have that minimal knowledge of the common warning signs can do wonders. And I think even at the primary care level, just making sure that's just not a couple questions that are asked, maybe more of a deep dive.
Right, because when you go into that primary care visit, that might be the first start, right? When a doctor says, "How are you doing?" more than saying fine and sort of moving along with the conversation, you want people to sort of bridge that gap, right? And sort of dig a little deeper.
Yeah, exactly. But then how does that play out? Because and of course I'm thinking more about children, but even adults, it's there's still that stigma surrounding, so there's that hesitancy to speak up. I was speaking to a young man, 15 years old, very athletic, good student, good family support. He doesn't live with a mental health condition. And I had said, I told him how sorry I was to hear about the suicide that had happened at his school. And he said, yeah, he said, I'm just, it was so horrible to hear, can't believe it. But luckily, he was kind of stating everything that he had going on. Therefore, maybe he was immune to it.
Mm.
And even that kind of understanding is huge. Like you could check all the boxes, but there's still that genetic component that you might end up having a chemical imbalance in your brain. So it's not necessarily preventable, but identifying it early and getting treatment early will, just result in such a better outcome.
And people are able to mask it too, right? You could be, as you said, hitting those boxes, going to school, doing your homework, on the outside, seemingly being very successful, but inside be having these more intense conversations with yourself.
Yeah. And how many times did people, of course, I'm going to the most extreme to suicide, but how many people now you hear about someone? I remember actually, maybe it was 15 years ago, a neighbor, successful businessman. Whenever I saw him, he was so lovely, so personable, so outgoing. We had great conversations. I mean, minimal. And then when I found out he died by suicide, it's heartbreaking, of course, but then you think, just like you said, they're masking, and then so how do we create an environment that lets everyone know that they don't have to keep it to themselves? They can share those emotions and feelings.
And with NAMI, with the education piece and the advocacy piece, I know that those work together, but how do you start educating people who, and I think everyone's impacted by mental health, whether themselves or loved ones, so I don't know who isn't impacted, but let's say they come in and don't feel impacted, don't feel they need the education or it's not going to affect them. How do you bridge the gap between those people in the community that really could make a big difference?
Um, I think I think you make an impact with those people with personal stories. And because everybody has there's misconceptions about what mental illness is, what it looks like. When people would see my daughter when she was stable, they thought she had it all. They thought she didn't have a care in the world. She talented, beautiful, great personality, um, wonderful family. I say humbly. Um, so you would look at her and say, "No way does she have a serious mental illness," but she did.
And when you get involved with NAMI, let's say, you all are trying to open up the accessibility piece, right, for mental health for people in the area because mental health resources can be expensive. How does that piece of it work, that accessibility piece, making it available to everyone regardless of their, financial situation?
Oh gosh, I wish. Well, at NAMI, our
Mm-hmm.
classes, support groups, all of that is free. So that definitely is available to anyone. But as far as therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and that component, or that's a difficult one.
Right.
So the accessibility piece, but there are avenues to take. I think about like the community service boards in each city. So that is an avenue to take if someone isn't under the care of any physician and something is, happening to them. They can receive access through their community service boards, which is an amazing resource each city offers in Virginia.
And I've talked to a lot of people in this area that say we do have a lot of resources, such as the community services board, such as NAMI and other organizations in the area. It's more about reaching the right people, about understanding how to get them there. I mean, do you feel like we have the resources and people don't know how to utilize them? Do you feel like we're more on the other end, that maybe the resources aren't the best suited for, certain situations? I mean, I guess just what is the layout right now of mental health resources in Hampton Roads?
Yeah, well, first, when you were laying out the question, I thought, thinking back to 2016 and not knowing anything that was available as far as anything, we still have a lot of people calling the office in that same position. And I think it's, a lot of the times it's normal. You don't know what's out there because you've never needed it. So that piece, there can always be more awareness. I'm still shocked that a lot of people don't know about 988. That surprises me. But then again, this is what I do. Um, so, um, so I think the layout. I think personally, um, yes, I think we need more clinicians across the board, from therapists to psychiatrists. Um, but I also see as a deficit in our community um, the the availability of beds for those who are in acute crisis. And then the step down after they're released from an acute stay at a hospital, whether it's 5, 7, 10, 15 days, the next step, because you're discharged and it's such a scary world because the loved one isn't necessarily, they're out of that acute situation stable enough to be discharged, but not stable enough to live necessarily safely and successfully, if that makes sense.
Right, that transition period from full-time facility care to home care. And
Yeah.
it's,
And there
I,
are there are programs,
right.
intensive outpatient programs, but they always end, and you just they're it's difficult.
There's a newer, I should say, opening in the fall, psychiatric emergency department in Hampton, excuse me, with Riverside, and I've heard other instances of opening up or trying out, I should say, new resources to take weights off emergency departments for mental health issues, to take, I guess, and
Yeah.
try to fill the gap between care. But the first thing that you had mentioned is, in general, the physician shortage that we're experiencing in that mental health field. Unfortunately, even conversations like this, that shortage alone is a huge weight, on the mental health field for someone trying to get an appointment, someone trying maybe to do what we had been talking about, earlier intervention. How do you feel about how that shortage has been? Have you seen, obviously the drawbacks of that?
Oh yeah. Because I'm on the community service board for Virginia Beach as well. Um, you just you see the vacant positions across the board, across the cities that we serve, NAMI Coastal, and then you just have so many different hospitals or facilities competing for all the same potential, employees. And so how to solve how to solve that problem. And I think I'm not sure that workforce is coming back. So then how to just shift and kind of pivot to um, a new normal. So I think that's where that telehealth component comes in. Um, that's an invaluable resource, but that's not for everybody either.
Right. Some people need that in person connection, especially if this is new to them, and especially if maybe they're on the spectrum of not being as involved with, different technology or wanting to do. I just think it's different face to face
Yeah,
for
it is.
many.
But also the telehealth and some of our support groups we have via Zoom. Um, and sometimes that is what they're looking for, the Zoom component, because either they don't have the energy to get out of their house. They may have, been working all day and they just the thought of, not going home and then coming to a support group, there could be the anxiety or the inability to drive. So it's a great component to have, but then I would say on the flip side, um, my daughter, before her hospital stay in 2022, had a telehealth visit, and her body language was able to be masked more in the Zoom. And there's so much you just pick up when you're in person.
And I want to say too, for anyone watching in a different way, I know that sometimes people might think age is a factor and not being able to get to an appointment, get through to therapy if you've never done it before. But a Centera doctor I spoke with back in May gave an example of, I think, a 81-year-old that his brother recommended him go to therapy, and he jumped in, and I thought that was so great that I think some people see age as maybe a obstacle, but it just goes to show that maybe the right conversation or the right spark or piece of advice from somebody could be what leads them to therapy or sort of gives them that push.
Yes, definitely. And I think that is, once you start volunteering with NAMI and becoming more a part of it, you naturally start talking about it outside of the classes, outside of whatever way that you're connected with our affiliate. And I end up bringing it up in so many different conversations, and not even if it's a mental health related conversation or just oh yeah, my daughter was hospitalized there, and then it opens up a whole new avenue of discussion. And you're right, you could just say um, something simple about therapy, which they may have never thought about, and that could be just a little nudge that
And
they need.
while we're in this period of, it's not even a month till some people go back to school, which I'm sure they can't believe if they're watching this right now. But, we're in that zone where people are going back to school. It's post pandemic. We've seen the impact of that on kids. But with an organization like NAMI, if people want to get education or their kids are struggling, I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out how to get involved. What's the best first step, with the organization like NAMI to find out more and to get in touch with you all?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way is just that initial information is just looking at our website, which has, explains everything that we do. It has our schedules. And then, or the calling the office. We consider it a warm line, which I had never heard before. I was volunteering. So it's not a hotline, it's not, manned 24/7, but we have someone answering between 10 and 4, Monday through Fridays, and that person can just explain. And it depends on what somebody's looking for. Like in our example, a lot of the times it is a family member who becomes a part of us first. And just like our situation, they're looking for more information, more resources that can help them help their loved one. So, family to family is a big entry point. And so it depends on what they're looking for. Now, as far as children, we have those educational or presentations, but as far as children having a support group, we don't have a support group. The support groups we have are for 18 and older. Um, and and then, we always, we're all we have a couple of staff members, but I'm a volunteer, so we always need volunteers, whether you have the lived experience or not. So
And then we
I don't
talked a
even know
little
if I
bit.
answered.
Oh no, that was, and we talked a little bit about community service boards, excuse me, as well. But if someone's in a crisis, I guess, and we want them to feel like they have resources available around here, and in terms of getting to that family to family course, or just finding out more about how they can help their loved ones, is NAMI going to help them understand what is going on? I guess I want people to feel like they have hope in some way and they can access resources, but is it going to NAMI first, and understanding what's going on? Is NAMI maybe a couple steps later, after maybe they've
Oh,
got.
yeah. Oh, I see your question. Yeah. So what I see us as what we are is resources. So it always depends on where they are with regards to their loved one's mental health condition, where they are in that journey. Because like a parent spoke to me last night, they're in immediate crisis. I let her know about our support group, family support group, um, and the educational piece. But right now, they just need to get their daughter assessed immediately and under, receiving some treatment ASAP. So in that regards, in that immediate crisis, um, we are there to answer the phone and then give them that guidance. So that is part of the support. We have the support groups, but they can call if they only have our number. We can then help guide them to how to navigate their crisis. Um, and then if there is, so you're past that initial crisis and you're kind of in a position that, okay, maybe I can leave. I mean, because a big component is if you are taking care of that person and they're not either safe to be left alone, or you don't maybe trust them to be alone in the house, or they need that kind of supervision, then when they can find a time, when there is um, when the struggle has become less, then they can sign up for the free classes or the support groups.
Thank you. And thank you for flushing together my question. But I think, it's great that they were able to get that advice to seek immediate help and then understand that the resources are available with you all to learn more and to, form relationships moving through, the initial issue.
Yeah, and that also is another big time to plug 988. So, I mean, easy, 3 digits, and they will be linked. If they're calling from their cell phone, they'll be linked to the local hub, which will then kind of triage the call and give guidance there. I mean, you can always call us, but that 988 is 24/7.
And for people that don't know what 988 is, can you just, give a little explainer as to how it's different than calling 911?
Yeah. So 988 was brought about nationally July, I want to say July 15th, 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And so um, 988 came about so there would be a behavioral health response to a behavioral health crisis. So a lot of the times where we were in crisis, we'll call 911, and then they would dispatch officers. And so our officers, they might have crisis intervention team training, Um, but is are they equipped to deal with competently um, those types of behavioral health crises? Yes, they might be, but then you it's that behavioral health response is a trained counselor answering the phone. Maybe that's all the person needs, just a little discussion, what's going on, what's causing anxiety or stress, and then giving some resources over the phone. And then maybe it's bumped up to a more urgent need, in which case um, trained clinicians can answer the call in the field. So then I'm really stressed, I'm anxious, they're not able to help me over the phone. And then they come and talk to me in person. So it's you have somebody who isn't in uniform, you have somebody who is trained to be able to handle the situation and guide effectively. It's incredible what is taking place with 988.
And I'll make sure for anyone watching now that will be linked as well as other resources and information. So everything we're talking about here, including the community services boards, don't feel like you have to go look for that now. But the 988 number, I think such an easy thing. You hope for people now to remember, write it down and have that available because I imagine it does make such a difference than calling that 911 in a critical situation without that mental health element.
Yeah. I mean, now don't get me wrong, 911, they can
Mm-hmm.
handle it. We even in Virginia Beach, we have mobile co-responding teams, which has a clinician riding along. Not all the time, there's specific hours. So everything has progressed. I think about that question you asked in the beginning. How are we doing? We are moving in the right direction. So and with the officers, they are if someone ends up calling 911 and the dispatch understands, it's obvious it's a behavioral health call, a CIT officer will be dispatched and that CIT officer has had that additional training, which helps them to recognize behavioral health crises, how to de-escalate the situation with their body language, with their verbal language. So it's not as if it's necessarily a bad thing to call 911. And you definitely that 911 still wants to be utilized if a weapon is at the scene. So then the safety can be taken care of, that component by the law enforcement.
And it's nice to hear, I guess, from your perspective that you do see this change and this change moving forward. I know that we're almost out of time, but is there anything, I guess, daily, for people that NAMI recommends or for people to keep in mind about mental health? Is that sparking a conversation as simple as at the dinner table? Is that, just helping a coworker during the middle of your day? I mean, what are just some general things to keep this mental health conversation going?
Oh, I love that. It's kind of some takeaways that people could do. I think first from even a youth or adult perspective, you know your friends the best. You understand, their little quirks. You're with them a lot. So when something is different, kind of taking that time to ask and not necessarily take offense if they're acting differently or not communicating with you. So that could be self-isolating and, the depression component. I think keeping that conversation going, even thinking about stigma, I think about a lot of the homeless have mental health issues. And if you're driving, I think about Virginia Beach Boulevard, you're driving down Virginia Beach Boulevard and you happen to see a man who is barely clothed and yelling at the traffic, they're not just commenting, maybe negative disparaging remarks. That person is suffering with mental illness, and yes, they could be on drugs as well, but usually they're on drugs because they're trying to self-medicate to help with voices in their head or how they're feeling mentally. Um, so I think keeping that conversation going.
Right. Having that compassion element, having that extra second of asking why about a situation.
Yes, beautiful. Compassion, empathy. Empathy is just a huge one. And just, you know, trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And whether that's your friend who's taking care of her child who is suffering, just trying to see beyond. Maybe there's more going on.
Well, Susanna, thank you so much for talking to me this afternoon. I know we just scratched, the surface of what NAMI is, but I think, for it being relatable and accessible, it seems that the resource is there. So if anyone's watching now, if anyone's watching later, I'll have all of that linked so you can go to NAMI Coastal Virginia and learn more, as Susanna said, about the schedule and, finding information to give them a call. But Susanna, is there anything else that you want to share or, talk about? I know that we covered a lot, so.
I mean, the time has flown. So thank you. You are an easy person to talk to. And I just want to thank you for inviting me on to talk to you because obviously this raises awareness and that goes a long way towards educating.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to have accessible resources that people can grab on. And hopefully, if this reaches you and touches you, please share it along. There will be a link attached on YouTube, Facebook, and wavy.com to be able to connect with the resources we're talking about. But thank you again for watching. And Susanna, thank you again for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Sarah.